Hello and welcome to the Jordan Powers Experience. My name is Jordan Powers, and on today's episode, I am joined by Keith MacIntyre. Keith MacIntyre is the leader of the BC Libertarian Party. He's the owner of Big Bear Software and the Big Bear Innovation Center. He also has a history working with the CDC, the Center of Disease Control, tracking and recording pandemic spread. In his own words, he's one of roughly 5 people in Canada who is qualified to look at the data and discuss it when it comes to the current pandemic we are facing. I'm not gonna lie, I'm a little nervous to share this conversation, and the fact that I am nervous to share it almost makes me want to share it more. Which maybe I'm just crazy, but something inside me feels like in today's day and age, there's an accepted narrative that I'm not allowed to question. I'm not allowed to ask questions about. I'm not allowed to be concerned about. And that frightens me. As of August 23rd, the BC government has come out and they have said that they are going to implement a unprecedented vaccine passport, vaccine certificate, whichever you choose to call it. And I feel like when we're facing unprecedented actions from our government, it's okay to question those things. It's okay to be confused. It's okay to want to ask if it's necessary, if it is the right thing to do. And at the end of the day, I'm not the person to make that decision. I don't know what the right answer is. I don't know what the right thing is to do. But I do know that I deserve to have the right to a conversation and open dialogue. And for me, at least, it feels like it's getting increasingly more difficult to do that in our current day and age, in our current society. And so that's my intention with this podcast, is not to tell people what to think, not to tell people what to do. I am not encouraging people to not follow the current health rules and recommendations currently put out by the BC government. Like I said, I'm an average guy, like no university degree, average as they come, all across the board, average. And I feel like a lot of you listening to this are too, and we haven't, the dialogue and the communication between average people like myself and our government has been severed. It's been completely non-existent. And I don't think that's okay. And so my intention is to hopefully have other people on this podcast, and I can give you the average man's perspective. I can ask the average person's questions. I've become increasingly confused and frustrated and scared over the past year and a half, and I think I have a right to that. And I just hope that going forward we can have more open, free dialogue without being so divided and so hateful to one another. And so, like I said, my intention with bringing Keith on is to kind of hear him out, have a conversation, give some pushback, and hopefully this encourages other people to come on my podcast and discuss it. Like, I don't know if I'm trying to throw a Hail Mary here, but I would love to have Colin Bazaran, our Kelowna mayor, on my podcast to discuss some of these topics. I would love to have, as far as Dr. Bonnie Henry and Premier Horgan on my podcast to discuss these things. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if they don't give me the time of day, but I would hope that they do, and I would hope that that's something I can, facilitate in the future, because, like I said, I don't think the average person's perspective is being heard, even if that's just asking questions. And I'm willing to ask the dumb questions if it means getting the right answers, And so that's just my intention at the end of the day. And when it comes down to this BC vaccine passport, like I said, it is an unprecedented thing. And I'm not alone in questioning it and being concerned about it. I mean, the British Columbia Civil Liberties Association came out and said that this is an egregious violations of our rights and freedoms. That's not some random, dude out on the street who's holding an anti-vaxxer sign saying that there's microchips in it, okay? This is a real association, actually Canada's oldest civil liberties association. It says right here that their goal is to promote, defend, sustain, and extend civil liberties and human rights. Keith was at a conversation on CBC, the Mike Smith show with BC's former Attorney General, and he pointed out that when your actions, such as being unvaccinated, put other people's civil liberties at risk, that you then lose rights and privileges, and that's a viewpoint that I could understand, but I don't know. At the end of the day, like I said, I'm confused. And I just want to have a conversation to try to form a better opinion. I'm not trying to force anybody to think in any certain way. I hope you can listen to this conversation, listen to Keith, and take what you will from it. If at the end of the day you think that this vaccine passport is absolutely something necessary that we need to do to get out of this pandemic, then you are entitled to that opinion. If you think that it's unnecessary and it is a violation of our rights, you're entitled to that opinion. You might be proven wrong in a couple of years. It's possible that if this gets brought to court, that it's completely shut down. But yeah, like I said, my main goal with this is to just have an open, free dialogue and hopefully paint a clear picture of what the hell we're all experiencing right now. So yeah, this episode is not sponsored by anybody. This is just purely done on my own accord. If I do end up making any money from something like YouTube advertisement or anything like that, my plan is to donate it all to probably either UBCO or Okanagan College, and hopefully give some money back to some of the programs that are turning out nurses and doctors and whatnot and frontline workers, because at the end of the day, those people are the ones that are getting hammered most by, and of course, everybody who has lost a loved one to this horrible virus. But yeah, if I do get any money from that, trust that it will be going to somewhere that it's probably needed right now and not my own pocket. So without further ado, please enjoy my conversation with Keith MacIntyre. Okay, ready?
I'm ready.
3, 2, 1. Keith MacIntyre.
Hello.
Thank you for coming on my podcast.
Absolutely. My pleasure.
This is an interesting time, and
to say the least.
I think myself, as well as many others, are kind of confused and frustrated and overwhelmed with the situation of the past kind of year and a half involving the pandemic and the overload of information that we have access to nowadays and multiple different opinions. It feels like to me that people are becoming more divided than they kind of ever have been, at least in since I've been paying attention. And the reason I wanted to have you on the podcast here today is because as of August 23rd, the BC government decided that they were going to implement a vaccine passport. And that takes place on September 13th. You will need 1 dose of a vaccine in order to go to places like a restaurant, a movie theater, certain businesses. And as of October 24th, you will need 2 doses. And so my intention of having you here on the podcast is because I know that you oppose this vaccine certificate. And I felt like that side of the conversation has been suppressed, and people aren't hearing much about some of the counter arguments to something like this. And I think when your government takes an unprecedented act like a vaccine certificate, it's reasonable to question, is this necessary? Is this for the greater good? And is this something we want? So I'll kind of leave the floor to you to introduce yourself and give some of your background.
Sure. I'll keep the background shorter. We'll be here all day. But yeah, Keith MacIntyre. So as of May, I'm the leader of the BC Libertarian Party. So we ran the 4th most candidates in the last provincial election and broke records here in the Okanagan with all of our candidates. I didn't set out to be leader of a political party, but sometimes you have to step up and use your talents, especially in times like these. I also run a software company and a co-working space, Big Bear Software and the Big Bear Innovation Center. In a past life, I actually wrote pandemic software that the Center for Disease Control used for training for exercises prior to H1. So I would submit that I have probably more pandemic experience than even Dr. Henry and Dr. Tam. But they don't believe that.
Why do you say that? I heard you say that on your interview with, is it Mike Smith?
Yeah, it was a Mike Smith show. So yeah, it was a panel discussion with former Attorney General Barry Penner, who he's, if you listen to him, he's very excited to show that the charter has all kinds of outs to take our freedoms away, and he thinks that's a great thing. I happen to disagree. I mean, Pierre Trudeau wrote that charter.
Yeah.
And so here we are. But yeah, the experience. So I was trained by the CDC scientists. I had to read all the documentation. I wrote all the algorithms from scratch. I simulated literally thousands of different diseases. I'm a data analyst, a data guy. My brain just works in a very different way than a lot of people. And so I have an intuitive sense of data. And yeah, and then so they ran it for about 3 exercises prior to H1N1, which most people barely remember because it was managed fairly well.
And so when you were writing the software for the CDC, how long were you working with them? And for people that don't know, like, why does that qualify you as somebody that is able to talk about this and you have a clear understanding of pandemic spread and virus spread?
Yeah, I think it was about 1.5 years, and this is probably now almost 15 years ago. So it is a long time ago, but I had to learn about interventions. I had to learn the effect of interventions on the population. I also learned the fallibility of modeling as well, too. At the beginning of the pandemic, I was actually more worried that they were not treating this as seriously as they could be, because I could tell Dr. Henry had no idea about modeling. And then she disappeared for 3 or 4 days, and she came back and she was actually starting to talk some sense. But it was very clear to me at the start too that they weren't reporting numbers correctly. They were not reporting age distributions. They certainly weren't reporting that in care homes they were euthanizing seniors at the start, which was upping the death numbers. And one of the big things they weren't reporting correctly, and they still don't, is clusters. And one of the big outbreaks in Alberta at the time was Brooks and High River. The meatpacking plants had an outbreak, and so your cases are going up relatively steadily, and as you're testing more, which they don't talk about either, how testing more changes the numbers. But they don't report the cluster. So when you find an outbreak in a place like High River and you test 900 people and they're all positive, that suddenly makes the numbers look really, really scary in one day. But it's not actually scary. You're supposed to take that cluster out and report that separately, and you got to smooth the numbers and stuff. But what they were trying to do is get the case numbers as high as possible to scare people. And I actually do believe, for the most part, most people through this whole thing have been lying to us to protect us. Right. Which I don't agree with as a libertarian. I think, we need government and people with the knowledge and the data need to share all the data, and then they allow us to make our own decisions. Even Dr. Fauci has said that he's lied about herd immunity because, we couldn't handle the truth. Well, I want the truth. And once you submit that the government will lie to protect you, you can't actually trust anything they say. Because who are they to say that they know what's best for me individually? And that's how they think. And they think greater good and the collective. And, I'm all for not getting other people sick. I don't want to kill anyone's grandma. But the way they've handled all of this has been very concerning, and it's brought us to this point where there is this divisiveness, and people are practically murderous, that if you go against the grain on anything, and they think the vaccine passports is going to stop the pandemic, and when you have people 1.5 years of fear, and all they want is their lives back, and it's been happening over and over, right? If you just do this, you'll have your life back. Oh, no, sorry. Do this, then you'll have your life back. And so we're at that point again. And people are so fed up. And they've been told vaccine passports will stop the pandemic. It won't. And, I think we're seeing everybody's got a different line. Mine was crossed very early. My sister's was crossed a few months later. Lots of people, I had some friends a few months ago. He's like, yeah, just get the vaccine. Everything's going to be fine. He's okay with quarantine hotels and all this stuff. But he said, if the vaccine doesn't work like they said, then he's going to be mad. I'm like, Okay, you've got a line. And so I think we're hitting the point where people are starting to realize they've been telling us mistruths and misinformation from the very beginning to protect us. Or I think in some cases there's more nefarious things going on. But at a certain point, you have to stop listening to them because they're not making any sense.
Yeah, that's been the most difficult thing for me is the blatant lying that seems to be happening. I mean, you can look back in January and see Trudeau clearly say that there was going to be no vaccine passports for Canadians. Dr. Bonnie came out and said that in May that there wouldn't be any plans. It would cause more inequities in our society. Now, I've heard a counter argument that what she did say was that it wouldn't limit public services, and there's people saying that this particular vaccine certificate is not limiting public services. I'll let you talk about that in a bit, but my kind of counter argument is, well, who's stopping them from doing it in the future? Because they clearly don't stick to their word yet. And the way it was described to me is public health's job isn't to tell us the truth. It's to tell us stories to make us do what they want us to do because they don't trust us with the information. We're not immunologists. We're not doctors half the time. I'm an average dude who, doesn't even have a university degree. So, do you disagree with that as a libertarian, that they should be they should be telling us the full truth? Yeah,
I think all the data should be open, and Dr. Henry was hiding data from the beginning, and her excuse was, well, if we don't have problems in some communities, then people will relax, and I disagree with that because they aren't infallible, and that's been proven time and time again. And the more data that they share, and sure, let's submit that 70% of the public doesn't have the time or the ability to think about this or do data analysis, but some of us do. And so I want to know that truth. And so when they say 2 weeks to flatten the curve, they say that because they know that 2 weeks is something people can comprehend. Is palatable. Yeah. People freaked out about that. And I'm like, you understand, this is going to go on for months. And then it happened again last November, and Dr. Henry said, we're just going to do 2 more weeks. And I saw people on Facebook, and they're like, come on, everybody, let's just bear down for 2 weeks. I'm like, we've heard this story before. Yeah. It's not going to be over until at least May. And we saw that. It was even after the long weekend before they gave us a little bit more freedom. What was the first point you made? I wanted to respond to that, but I'm forgetting it now. Public
health and their ability to, they tell us stories to basically.
Yeah, so I actually know Dr. Henry's spin doctor. She's very, very good at her job. She used to work for one of the biggest marketing companies in Canada. She would be hired by like companies like Staples and these sorts of things, and she's very, very good. Bills out at a very, very high rate. But you can see the marketing in it. Like I don't get manipulated by marketing as much. Everybody still is a little bit, but most people are very manipulated by that. And so, you create words like safe 6. It's not an accident. It's not that 6 people is safer than 7 people. There's a reason why it's safe 6 and flatten the curve. And there's marketing material and all this kind of stuff. And, and I think they think they're doing a good job, but they don't have enough knowledge to understand that. And I think, the average person can't analyze the data, which is why it has to be out there, and there has to be public discourse, healthy public discourse among different people with different opinions, which hasn't happened the whole time. People will attack me. They're like, well, you're just a data scientist. You're not a doctor. Well, do you know what? Doctors aren't capable of analyzing large amounts of data. That's not their skill set. Doctors are really good at listening to what their superiors tell them is the thing to do, and they do that because they're busy. They don't have time to analyze all this data. So when the health authority says get vaccinated, it's going to help. Well, sure, they're going to push that. Very few doctors actually take the time to decide whether this is a good thing or not. And we don't want to get too much into this, but I know very close personal friends and friends of friends who've had very serious reactions to the vaccine, and the doctors won't report it as a vaccine injury. And I think, this is my personal opinion, I think what's happening is they don't want to cause vaccine hesitancy. They think the vaccine will solve everything, so they're underreporting these injuries. Whereas with COVID, they overreport.
Right.
In Canada, and I think it's still like this, but definitely at the beginning and through most of it, a COVID death or hospitalization was if you tested positive within 28 days of your hospitalization or your death. That's a COVID case. Doesn't matter what's happening.
And could you get that COVID case at the hospital and still be?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I know several people that got it at the hospital. Like, it's maddening that they're still putting COVID patients in the hospital. If it's such a dangerous disease, use the field hospitals. It's in the pandemic plans. But anyway, so within 28 days, it's kind of the COVID death. It can be a broken leg. And could be anything, and it ends a COVID death. And there's very, very good reasons why you'd do that in a pandemic with a new disease. Because if you're unsure of what this disease is doing, you don't know what's actually killing them. Guy falls off the ladder, maybe it was actually this disease. But we know a lot more about COVID now. It's not something that comes on really strong, really fast. So they shouldn't be reporting it that way anymore. And what's maddening is they don't report vaccine injuries the same way, right? They should be reporting every health issue that has happened because this is such a new vaccine, but they won't. Mm-hmm. And, then they talk out of both sides of their mouth.
Yeah. I'm not in a position to obviously debate scientists on when it comes to the vaccine and if it's safe and effective. But I would be lying if I said I didn't have close friends that have had negative side effects after taking it. And one very close friend who was supposed to join us, but unfortunately got too busy. He started developing myocarditis a day, if not within the day of when he got his first dose. And he's been dealing with this for over 7 weeks. His job has been affected by it. He's a young, fit, healthy 26-year-old, couldn't even walk upstairs without wheezing, feels like his heart is just ripping through his chest. And now with this current vaccine certificate, vaccine passport, whatever you like to call it, coming out, he is basically being forced to get the second dose if he wants to go about his life normally. He has a business thing out in Vancouver, and he won't be able to book a hotel if he doesn't get his second dose. And he's been medically advised by the doctors not to get his second dose. Mm-hmm. And for me, those stories have been suppressed. He tried to tell that story on Reddit and r/British Columbia, and he got banned. It was labeled as misinformation. Wow. Everything got deleted that he had posted.
He's talking about himself.
He's talking about his own personal experience, and he's not lying. That's the crazy thing. And doctors he said, are even worried to kind of work with them, and because they're afraid of losing their jobs and stuff. Mm-hmm. So it's those kind of stories that really frustrate me, and that, when it comes to this vaccine passport, that's the one thing I don't understand is why there's not medical exemptions for somebody like him. But just going back a little bit, you said that when you were working with the CDC, you looked into interventions by the government and how that would affect the scenario. Mm-hmm. When you say interventions, are you talking about something like the restaurant ban, that like them having to shut down at 10 p.m., that kind of thing?
Yeah, those kind of things, whether it's shutting down schools or blocking off quarantining neighborhoods, those kind of things. And locking down an entire country is something that you just don't do. Doesn't matter, from a freedom perspective, it's not a good idea. But regardless of what the disease is, if there's 5 Ebola cases, everyone's just going to stay home. Ebola is not actually dangerous in North America. We can mitigate that, but I was trying to find some common ground with the BC CDC. I talked to Mel Cradgen there a couple of times, and I wrote a letter to Dr. Henry, and he, my data analysis, he said, was completely spot on. And I said, okay, can we at least maybe agree that we can do regional restrictions? Because why are we doing the same thing in Prince Rupert that we're doing in Surrey?
Right.
Where that's the hot spot at the time. And he's like, yeah, I agree with you. I'm like, well, why aren't you doing it? And he said, oh, Dr. Henry doesn't want to. But now that it works towards her narrative to have a hot spot, right? Because Kelowna's got a very strong freedom movement. There's a couple of communities like Salmon Arm who are very, very adamantly against these government interventions. So she's mad. She's mm-hmm. upset. So the government's very good at using media, right? And so they lead things in, and you start to see in the media 50 surgeries canceled at Kelowna General Hospital, nurses walking off the job in Kamloops and Kelowna because they're stressed. Well, what's happening is I know several surgeons that they just took a year off because they don't want to be involved with this.
I don't blame them.
There's nurses that are walking off the job because they don't want to get a forced medical treatment.
And many are overwhelmed and stressed, and this it can't be easy for them.
Well, yeah, but this is a systemic problem with the healthcare system in Canada. The government's had a monopoly on healthcare for decades, and they're not very good at it.
Right.
And there's a toxic relationship between the BC government and the healthcare workers. They always fight. They're always having strikes. So the healthcare system was overwhelmed anyway. And what people also don't look at is, well, okay, so we're having the lockdowns and restrictions, and we're going to prevent COVID deaths. One, if they would have not euthanized seniors at the start, that would have been better.
What do you mean by that?
There's an inquest going on in Montreal. So at the beginning of the pandemic, what they would do is if you had COVID symptoms, they would give you a cocktail of morphine and Ativan and something else, and basically mercy kill the seniors. The idea was, well, we're going to get overwhelmed and we aren't going to be able to treat them. This happened in New York as well. That's why they were sending patients to the seniors' homes, because they know they can get away with this mercy killing. It's horrifying. There's a woman in Quebec, she coughed, she drank water and she choked and she coughed, and 2 days later she's dead. They lost her COVID test. So they thought she had COVID. Let's help her along. It's horrifying.
And you said there's something going on in Montreal where they're attempting to prove this, or?
Yeah, there's an inquest going on right now. Yeah,
if that's true, that's insanity.
It's in the mainstream media. I'm not. I don't overinflate things. Like, this is horrifying. And again, if we wouldn't have been having 200 deaths a day at that period, we had 100 or 50, which was probably more reasonable to what was happening, we wouldn't be so afraid.
Right.
And the other thing with the modeling too, like, you don't go from 0 deaths to 200 deaths a day unless it's a very, very serious illness, which everybody thought that it was because the stats went up so fast. But it's clear with how the disease is presented over the next year and a half. This was burning around here long before the first case was diagnosed in Canada. And again, like, yeah, and the amount of testing they were doing, all the data was done very, very poorly and continues to be done poorly.
There's a ton of evidence to suggest that this virus did leak from the Wuhan Institute of Virology, and that it had happened in September 2019.
I'd bet money it started in the Winnipeg lab, but
really?
Yeah.
Okay. Why do you say that?
Well, there's 4 labs in the world that would have access to this type of virus, and there was some shady stuff with Wuhan scientists in Winnipeg that got removed, and the Parliament was actually trying to get released all the documents related to these Wuhan scientists getting exported back to Wuhan, and Justin Trudeau's suing the Speaker of the House. The Speaker of the House compelled them to release this data, and this doesn't come up in the election.
No.
Like, no prime minister has ever sued the Speaker of the House before.
That's insane.
So he's hiding something pretty big. I'm not saying for sure it is, but it's like, to me, it's a toss-up, 50-50.
Well, he's the first prime minister to be brought up in front of the Ethics Commission as well, right? Or
lots have. Chrétien was a bunch of times. Liberals are inherently corrupt, but so are the Conservatives and so are the NDP, and basically every major party is corrupt because all they want is power and control.
Exactly.
Whereas Libertarians, we don't even want to be in government, but we'll do it so that we can dismantle the government and give the power back to the people.
Right.
We believe in small government, but this centralized approach, like healthcare, back to the healthcare. The centralized approach to healthcare is very, very wrong. And so when they shut down all the hospitals because they were afraid of COVID, well, surgeries weren't happening, biopsies weren't happening. I think in Canada it's like 500,000 procedures weren't done last year. I know people that have stage 3 cancer. If they were caught a year ago, it would have been stage 1 and have a much better chance at survival. So. And in Ontario, they 65 years old and under, they've determined from April 2020 to May 2021, 5 times more people died than expected than from COVID. So I think it was like 5,600 extra deaths in young people. And so to me, that's a clear correlation that decimating the medical system to stop this disease actually killed an awful lot more people.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's a lot to take in.
I got a lot of data in my head.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, I'm going to have to try to provide some links and stuff like that in the description to what you're discussing. But what do you kind of think the reason for this vaccine certificate is? Like, is it, because the argument would be that it's obviously meant to stop the spread of COVID. And in my perspective, I look at some of the measures that have been taken, like stopping restaurants from being open past 10 p.m. And as soon as that happens, there's 200 plus people down by the Kelowna Sales partying, and there's plenty of videos of this online. People are then going home and they are throwing house parties that is completely unregulated and restricted. And so for me, it doesn't make sense that if your goal was to stop the spread, how these policies are actually working, because people aren't listening, and that's a reality that we're living in. And I think with this new certificate, we're going to see now a group of unvaccinated people, the people that are supposed to be spreading this the most, get into large groups and protest. And so if you know this is going to happen and you know that's going to contribute to the spread, why enact that policy? Why impose those restrictions?
Yeah, or tell everybody to go to the Okanagan in the summer, right? Like it was predictable, and it's either incompetence or they have a plan. And I think it's a balance of both. Mandates don't work, and again, this is a libertarian approach. I relate it to children, right? So when kids are 4 or 5 years old, you lie to them for their protection, you lie to them for their happiness, these sorts of things. And then as they get older, you want them to think for themselves, and they're going to make mistakes. And my boys are 16 and 18, and they do things that I don't agree with, but they need to learn how to be adults and think for themselves. Well, the government doesn't like that. They are treating us all like toddlers, right? And that's where you get fines and you get mandates. And I can see in a couple of instances, Dr. Henry's May statement where she said there would never be vaccine passports and the mask mandate, right? And she had very good reasons why she would never do those. And the inequities in society is a very good one. The mask mandate, I don't know if you remember, but before that came in, most people were wearing them. I'm dubious on the effectiveness, but most people were wearing them. And she said, one day, we're not going to do a mask mandate ever, and this is why. Horgan comes back to work after his illegal snap election, and he starts interfering. He hints at it. The day after that, there's a mask mandate. And then people are angry. People are yelling at people in stores. The protests get bigger, which is what they want, because the government likes an enemy. If there's an enemy, everybody can blame the people at the Freedom Rally. They can blame the anti-vaxxers. They can blame the anti-maskers. They're the reason the pandemic's happening, and it hides their incompetence. This is playbooks from centuries of governments. Like it's mind-blowing that it still works. Yeah. And so the vaccine passports are exactly the same thing. It is not going to stop the spread. It's well known. I read an article recently that 70% of the spread in one area was from the vaccinated people. Vaccines don't stop you from catching a virus. They or potentially stop you from having severe disease. So, but Dr. Henry, in a letter to SD23 to parents, she said, get your kids vaccinated because then you'll be fully immune. Well, that's a lie. And so people but they're told that, and they think they're immune. I'm vaccinated. I can go do whatever I want. They stop washing their hands. They start doing risky behavior again, and they're the problem. But we can blame the unvaccinated people because, well, that's an easy group to blame. There's a Kelowna woman. She came back from Mexico, extremely ill, hospital. She'd been to Mexico, double vaccinated, COVID hotspot. She knew it, and she admitted. She said, I took no precautions. But it's the unvaccinated that is the problem. And so the vaccine passport, you're still going to have people spreading the disease. And so it's not about spread. It's about getting more people vaccinated. So I actually find it quite psychotic. Like we've got 80% 1 dose in BC and 75% 2 doses. That's enough. You don't need more than that. So it's insane that they want more, because, well, the pandemic's not stopping, so we must vaccinate more people. Well, actually, the logical conclusion is that the vaccines aren't doing what you want them to.
I guess people's argument to that is that the 75% or the 80% isn't enough for herd immunity, would be that there's variants that are being created. Is that not a reason why these vaccines aren't working as well as they should be, or?
There's no data to suggest that the variants aren't being created by people by having the vaccine. There's some studies that show they might be created because we kept immunocompromised people alive for 4 or 5 months and the virus mutated too much. The fact is we just don't know. Right. And they're not sharing the data. It's actually coming out very clearly. I read one today. I think they're like, for the Delta variant, it's only about 66% effective. Israel's showing that 6 months after the vaccine, it's only 47% effective, right, which of course they're trying to push into booster use. But in essence, this thing can't be stopped. A highly mutatable virus like the coronavirus, I remember last November, it had already mutated 12,000 times, and it's unfortunate, but I don't believe this thing can be stopped. Mm-hmm. And certainly continuing to push vaccinations and mandates is not helpful. I am, libertarian stance is your body, your choice. I don't care what you put in your body, whether it's heroin or a vaccine, not my business. That's your choice. I don't know you. As long as you're not harming another human being, then it's okay. So of course, if I'm sick and I'm knowingly sick and I come in here and sick this close to you, that's wrong. Of course, the argument will be asymptomatic spread and all that kind of stuff. But you know that there's a virus out here. You understand that I'm not vaccinated. You've chosen that you're comfortable to have this, so there is no problem here. We have a human-to-human transaction, and we're okay with it. And the same can happen in a grocery store. If you're not comfortable with me not wearing a mask in a grocery store, you have a choice. If I'm crowding you, you can ask me to leave. You can go down another aisle, right? I'm not physically harming you by not wearing a mask in a grocery store. So the passports are a way to get more people vaccinated, and they admit it. Mm-hmm. There's some people on the fence, especially young people. This is going to push people because taking away patio dining is completely ridiculous, right? Yeah, and taking away weddings, right? And so they're looking for ways to get more people vaccinated because they myopically believe that this is the best thing. Mm-hmm. They may be right. I don't think they are, but they may be right. But this is not the way to go about it. Right. Be up front about it, and share all the data. Yeah, and that's the you can understand why they wouldn't want to come out and say like, hey, we can't stop this thing. Like, it would cause a lot more fear, and I mean they've been creating fear since the beginning. But that's where you as a libertarian come in and just say, hey, the truth should come first. If we can't stop this thing, then we have to accept that and figure out how to move on with our lives. You mentioned, I'm interested to hear your perspective on human rights, because I hear a lot of people say that this vaccine certificate is not infringing upon an individual's freedoms and not infringing upon an individual's human rights, because something like a restaurant or a movie theater or any of that kind of stuff is not a public service and it's not essential. What would be your argument against that? Well, I don't think it's the government's right to decide what is essential for me or not essential for me. Visiting family entertainment is essential for some people. The restaurant one, there's lots of places people are renting a space where they're not allowed to have somewhere to cook, and so they need to eat out in a restaurant. And that's the problem with the government. They don't actually think about everybody. Right. Which is why we as libertarians, we're like, we don't know you. We don't know your personal situation. So we want you to make your own choice because you know you better. And, John Horgan will get on in his press conference, and he says, well, it's evidenced that 80% of British Columbians agree with the vaccine passports because they've gotten the vaccine. And I'm like, what the heck kind of logic is that? That doesn't make sense. Most people I know got the vaccine because they think they need it to travel. Yeah. and now they're going to get it because they think they need it to go to a restaurant.
Or because they think it's going to stop the spread and all those things, but that doesn't mean that they agree with the vaccine passport.
No. And he also will say business owners are in support of this because they asked for it. And no, what's happening is business owners don't want their business taken away, and they think this was a path to get there. And I'm not a very aggressive person, but I'm at the point now where we need to start boycotting businesses that are supporting the vaccine passport. And I know that they're just doing what they're trying to do to save their business, but they're actually hurting themselves more in the long run. And I'm at the point where just doing my job doesn't cut it for me anymore. I think it's part of the problem now. And I also encourage vaccinated people, don't share your status, because this is a very slippery slope we're on. This isn't the end. This isn't a vaccine passport for one thing. This is they have a bigger plan. I don't know what the full picture is, but if we don't stop this violation of our privacy and our rights now, we're in for a world of trouble in the future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would be shocked if this vaccine passport disappears January 2022.
There's no way.
There's no way. They've never followed any of the things that they said that they were going to at this point. And it's always 2 weeks. It's always we're not implementing this, and then they do.
Mm-hmm.
What do you have to say to people who say you have a SIN card, you have a driver's license to drive, you have to wear a seatbelt when you drive, you're not allowed to drink and drive, you're not allowed to smoke in restaurants? Food, restaurants have to abide by a food standard.
Mm-hmm.
As a libertarian, do you agree with all of those things, or do you think those are completely different from this scenario?
Both. I don't agree with all of them, and I don't think they're similar. The Attorney General said the same thing, right? Mm-hmm. He's like, we're not allowed to smoke in restaurants, and that's a difficult one. Like, I grew up in a smoking home. I don't like cigarettes. I'm glad that I don't have to encounter smoke, and I think that is a violation of the non-aggression principle if you're blowing smoke into my face. However, I don't think it should be completely excluded. If they're a smoking owner of a restaurant hires smoking staff with smoking patrons and they're comfortable with that, they should be allowed to do it.
Right.
I don't agree with someone who is a non-smoker and they're forced to be in a smoking environment. But if there's enough choice and there is an actual true free market, then the free market takes care of these things. If there's no market for smoking restaurants, then there won't be there. And again, I abhor smoke, and I'm glad I don't have to encounter it, and glad there's less in the world right now. Of course, there's some coercion by the government because there's a lot of tax money in cigarettes, and they continue to encourage that, even though they say they don't. Seatbelts, completely different thing as well. It's not the same thing. People use the seatbelt argument on the masks, right? You'll wear a seatbelt. I'm like, yeah, that's completely different. Like, if I crash, I'm gonna get thrown through a windshield. Mm-hmm. I actually have a friend who doesn't wear seatbelts. He's like, I feel like I'm safer without it.
Right.
And that's his right. But then people will say, well, then if you get sick, you don't deserve to be treated. I'm like, wow. So I've never once said I wish you would die.
Right. But
you would wish death on me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's wild how somebody could say they're compassionate and then wish death on somebody for having a different opinion.
Yeah.
For me, it seems like the reason it's different is because you have bodily autonomy at the end of the day, right? And mm-hmm. you have the right to decide what you put into your body. What do you have to say to people that say they're not forcing you to put this into your body? Like, that you still have access to public services, you're just not allowed to go to these certain places.
For now. And it's not direct force, but it is coercion, right? And again, most people got the vaccine because they want to travel. Or stop the spread, or think they're doing the right thing. All of these things, they think it's a conscious choice that they're doing, but it is coercion by the government, and that's what I don't agree with. If this vaccine is so good and so effective and so safe as they say, then they shouldn't need to market it. They shouldn't have to have $1 million lotteries in Alberta to get people to take it.
Right.
The article came out yesterday from Ontario where they're saying we can't reach herd immunity with the vaccinated population, so we have to start vaccinating children. Now, this is very maddening to me because the death rate for children for COVID on the CDC website is 20 per million infections. In the entire United States, 500 COVID deaths for under 18, and that's probably reported 7 times higher, but still 500 out of a country of almost 400 million people. And they're going to start vaccinating children for a disease that can't harm them?
It doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense.
No.
And it's not going to work. And that's the thing with this, is it is a mutatable virus. It's shown that it is, and it's not going to work. And at some point, we just have to bite the bullet and say this thing exists, and we need to take precautions. And for God's sake, stop putting COVID patients in the regular hospital.
Yeah, seriously.
Like the field hospitals have been... Alberta had, like, in the Butter Dome and in Calgary, and not one patient went in them. And people will say, well, we're short-staffed in the healthcare industry anyway. Like, who's going to staff it? Canada spent $1 trillion, more than that now, fighting or trying to prop up businesses and give people free money and just so-called help. You telling me with $1 trillion you couldn't train a bunch of, or take retired people or train new people to work a ventilator?
And incentivize them, right? Like give these nurses and stuff more pay and more time off, and encourage people to join this field and help instead of firing them if they, like that's what doesn't make sense to me, is why they're firing people in the healthcare industry if they're so short-staffed and they're so overwhelmed based on their vaccine status. They've been helping this whole time for over a year without a vaccine, and so I don't understand why it's worse now than what it was before.
Yeah, it's maddening because if you go back to, I think it was 2015, this whole argument came up, and actually if you look back at the history of vaccines, you kind of see how they stepped us along here. But with the flu vaccine, they were trying to force nurses to get the flu vaccine, and the nurses union stood up and said, no, their body, their choice. Then they were trying to force them to wear extra PPE and masks if they weren't vaccinated, and the union stood up for them again and said that's a violation of their medical privacy. And I've done a lot of medical software as well. Medical privacy is paramount. There's lots of reasons why you don't want to share people's medical privacy, but now the unions are saying, yeah, we're all for mandatory vaccinations. I don't understand where this is coming from.
What are one of those reasons why it's important to keep your medical privacy and your medical history to yourself and have your own choice of what you put into your body? Yeah,
again, we don't know anybody's situation, right? Like I know lots of people have had quite severe injuries from this vaccine. I personally don't believe in the effectiveness of a flu vaccine. I've never got it. It drove my mom crazy. She's a retired pharmacist. Just get the vaccine. And I'm like, no, I don't want to. But I'm not willing to take that risk. Like for me, the risk of 1 in a million, if that's what it is, I think it's higher, of getting paralyzed. That's too much for me.
Right.
And so I take precautions in my life. I don't take chances with illness. I've rarely been sick in the last 12 years. So I don't feel the vaccine's the right choice for me. And so with privacy, it was nice to see the health authority apologize, although I think they deserve worse for sending these envelopes out. I don't know if you remember those, but the envelopes had bright blue letters, "We've reserved your vaccine appointment." And I had lots of discussions with people. They're like, well, if you can't have that conversation with your spouse, you got bigger problems. And like, maybe you do. That's not my job as a leader to decide whether you have problems in your home or not. It's my job to protect your medical privacy. It can cause abuse. It can cause, use an example with the envelope of a hardcore anti-vaxxer and a hardcore vaxxer, and whichever way you go, one spouse gets the vaccine and one doesn't get the vaccine. Either way it goes, it could cause an abusive situation. Mm-hmm. I got the envelope, you didn't get it. You got that vaccine, you're giving me spike proteins, like, right? Or the other way, you're putting me in danger because you're not vaccinated. And we can't predict someone's personal situation. Yeah, I heard that they did send it out to people who had already been double dosed as well, but I guess the point there is that it seems like another trick or coercion point to get people to get vaccinated. And there's no way they didn't do that on purpose, or
the fact that they didn't have the hindsight, the foresight to think, hey, this might be an issue for people it doesn't make sense. Still.
Yeah, they should be held to a higher account. If they're going to call themselves an authority, they should be truthful, because it's that the BC government put out a tweet saying tag your unvaccinated friends.
Really?
Oh yeah, they took that down pretty fast
Jeez.
after some backlash. And then, I go back to this School District 23 letter. I can send you a link for that, where she says in the letter, if you get double dosed, you are fully immune, and you won't spread variants and mutations.
It's a blatant lie.
It's an absolute lie.
Yeah. I guess the theory is that they will spread it less, and they're less likely to create variants, but to put that out there as if you won't is a blatant lie.
And what really got me upset was she went on one of her press releases, and she basically said to children, you don't need your parents' consent. You don't even need to talk to them. Mm-hmm. Go get your vaccine. And as a parent, that upsets me. I got a letter from the school district that said that, and they're misusing the Infants Act. So in the Infants Act, with informed consent, medical procedure can be done without your parents' permission, but it's meant as a last resort, where you have a parent who's putting their child in a dangerous situation. So then you can use the Infants Act to ensure the child's safety. But she's subverting that, and she's telling children to get their vaccine, which to me ends up being criminal assault.
Right. If you could summarize kind of overall what worries you about this vaccine passport and why you think it's such a bad idea, how would you summarize that?
I think my biggest worry is the divisiveness. It's been getting worse over the past year, and if you look how it started, everybody became an expert in 3 weeks on pandemics, and if you didn't understand it, you're an idiot. But that's just escalated into something worse. Like I said, people literally will wish you dead if you don't get the vaccine. The most progressive people especially. They're supposed to be compassionate. And it's causing a divide, and that worries me. I think there's some very iffy things going on at the federal level, at the government level, with some stuff with the United Nations and things. I don't want to get too far into that, but regardless, we have to live in a society where we're allowed to have discourse, and healthy discourse. I might be wrong about this, but I have information that other people don't have. I have knowledge and experience that other people don't have, and they have knowledge and experience that I don't have. But I get people that will discredit everything I say because I don't agree with what the health authority said. They've never had an open debate. Well, I don't know if you that town hall meeting that they had a few weeks ago.
No, I didn't see that.
So they actually, I know this because a lot of my friends were called, and they deliberately called known anti-vaxxers and said, call into this town hall, because they wanted the most extreme people to call in,
right,
to make them sound ridiculous.
Right.
And I've family members won't talk to me. It's that scares me, and we're in this place where we're not having human interaction anymore. Elections are happening without people. Like the provincial election, they canceled Thanksgiving. Well, that's where people would have gone and had debates and shared knowledge, and Zoom doesn't cut it. Mm-hmm. And so we start diminishing our humanity like that and start dividing. I actually think they want us to get violent. I think they want us to have riots, because then they can come in with the military and then they can exert more control. So that's why I'm very, very strongly suggesting to people, like, let's have coordinated and massive civil disobedience, but peaceful. So we're not yelling at servers, we're not yelling at business owners, but we are protesting. We're not spending our money there. We are helping them to understand. And, business owners are doing the vaccine passport because they don't want to lose their livelihood. Well,
right.
Let's show them that their livelihood will be okay if they don't comply. There's multiple businesses standing up for it. Bad Tattoo in Penticton, I saw, was in the news.
Rico Bambino here in town.
Yeah. So there's a few, but we need more. And there's actually a Facebook group I'm involved with thousands, and I think it's about 20,000 members popped up in the last few days of businesses standing up against this. And the reason why the last restaurant shut down, the protest didn't work, because it was a couple restaurants did it on day one, and Vancouver came in and they took their business license away, and then everybody was too afraid. Mm-hmm. So it needs to be coordinated, and the business owners need to say, hey, enough is enough. Why are you putting this on us? Why are you putting our staff in danger? Why?
Yeah, and to your point about when things do get uncivil and the government can then come in and take even more extreme measures to counteract that, you don't have to look too far back to realize that's happened. Like the Black Lives Matter protests that happened all across the world in the United States. It's clear that there were agent provocateurs that were causing violence and causing scenarios to escalate, so the government could come in and use extreme measures against the people who were peacefully protesting. Yeah. And that's a tactic that's been used throughout history. I don't know if it's happened here in Canada that I can point to. Obviously, that was in the United States and other places of the world, but your point stands true that if they truly did want violence and crazy things to happen, then they could use extreme measures to counteract that. And the message has to be very, very clear that is not the way forward. Like, peaceful protesting is absolutely no violence. Violence is not a good thing.
Yeah, but it won't take long before even peaceful protesting, they will be able to take that away. Australia is a good example. I think we're about a month or two behind them. They had their vaccine passports, and I was like, that'll never happen here. I mean, I knew that was going to happen, but they had recently 1,400 police and 300 military personnel locking people in their home. Vietnam's under complete and utter military rule right now. There's multiple countries in the world where you will be shot if you are unvaccinated and you leave your house.
Jeez.
South Africa, the riots there's 2 provinces completely upside down. Nobody talks about this stuff.
No, and you can see videos coming out of Australia of individuals who are on the beach, and there's a helicopter flying over top saying, "You are not allowed to be on the beach right now. Return home. The police are on their way." And they've had, I could get this wrong based on the time of this filming, but I think the last time I checked, they'd had 9 deaths since October or something like that.
They have almost nothing, and they're going to have to deal with this anyway. And history will show they're probably going to be upset that they didn't allow natural immunity over the last year and a half, and that they did lock down. And we have to be careful too with what we're sharing, because there is a lot of and I think some of it's intentional misinformation, so it gets shared. Like there was the one in Australia going around where 24,000 students are getting rounded up into the stadium and taken away from the parents, and it was actually completely misrepresented.
Okay.
And there's bad stuff happening, but every time we share something that is that easily disproved, we're doing a disservice. A lot of times it comes out with it happened during the Trump elections and the one of the Paris riots and the Cuba riot too, where they show this picture and there's there's 1 million people. Well, Google image search will show that was from another riot a long time ago. So we got to be careful that we're sharing real and true information. And I've been caught a couple times sharing something. Oh, that sounds really good, but it's not true. And they will use that to try to discredit anyone that's against the narrative. So we're going to be very cautious of this.
Yeah, there is a problem with misinformation online, but I don't believe the solution is censoring everything.
Absolutely not.
Yeah. I'm curious about your opinion on if private businesses decided to implement this vaccine certificate themselves. So they weren't put in a position by the government where they had to implement this vaccine certificate, and they weren't put into a situation where the government creates an environment where they have no choice but to ask and implement this vaccine passport. So on their own accord, a private business owner says, hey, I want to keep my customers safe from this virus. I think you need to be vaccinated to come in. I'm going to implement a vaccine certificate in order to use my business. Would you agree with that? Or
so this is a fantasy world where the government isn't controlling people.
Yes.
Yeah, again, it depends. It's on the level of coercion, right? But it does a very core principle of libertarians is property rights. So it is your business, it is your choice, and yeah, it's hard to say to a business owner that you can't make your own choice, right? And so if that is their choice, like a lot of people got upset when it wasn't a mask mandate, but some stores were saying our customers are more comfortable if everyone's wearing a mask, but we'll accommodate you, and people got very upset. And I don't agree with that business owner's decision, but again, it is their business and their right. And it's a very tough situation because the government is forcing so much on everybody, so it's not a true free market, so it's not a true ideal society. But yeah, again, it's your business. You should be able to do with it what you want in all cases, but
well, I'm going to wrap this segment up really quick, and then just for the last segment, if you still have some time to kind of just discuss libertarian philosophies and principles. But I'd like to end it with just kind of, if you feel comfortable disclosing this information, do you believe COVID is real? You believe the virus is here, and are you an anti-vaxxer? Because I'm personally not an anti-vaxxer. I personally believe COVID is real, and it's a very serious thing that needs to be taken care of. I just disagree with some of the measures that are happening. So do you?
Yeah, I agree. There's a serious disease happening. I believe it's not being treated correctly, and I think it's being manipulated by governments, and they're using the crisis for control. Anti-vaxxer, I wouldn't say that I am. My kids are vaccinated. I am, although through the last year I've learned a lot more things about the medical industry, and so if I had kids again, I'd very seriously consider and probably wouldn't vaccinate them. Anti-vaxxer is a funny term. I think it was created a long time ago because there was hesitancy, and so let's plant something that can be easily disproved, and now the term anti-vaxxer happens.
Right.
And again, I think it comes down to personal choice. Yeah, and get it if you want. Don't wish I was dead if I don't. And the data is pretty clear to me that it's not helping that much. So.
Okay, well, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back. Okay. And we're back from our quick break. It's interesting. I hadn't really heard of libertarianism until I was probably in 24, 2-3 years ago, which is I just probably wasn't paying attention close enough, honestly. But I've been very interested in politics for a long time. I actually started out as self-identifying as a communist when I was an angry 16, 17-year-old teenager. And that's actually what started my kind of journey into learning more about different ideologies and stuff like that. And I think when people hear something like libertarianism or like the BC Libertarian Party, they instantly think liberal. Right, but our BC Liberal government is not libertarian.
Not at all.
So if you could maybe describe what a libertarian is in your perspective, and kind of some of the philosophies and principles that come with that.
Yeah, it is a challenge with the name. I ran into that a lot during the election. Oh, you're liberal, I'm not voting for you. And I was like, hold on.
Whoa.
I'm actually fairly new to official libertarianism. I've realized I've been libertarian and anti-authority my whole life. I just didn't know there was a name for it. I'd heard the word a little bit, but I didn't really know there was an active political party or such a well-defined ideology. And it was just through my co-working space, actually, and with somebody that I met last year, I started learning that it was a thing, and I looked into it, and like this aligns with me in a lot of ways. And for me, it comes down to, well, the principles are very simple. Don't hurt anyone. Don't steal my shit.
Right.
Like, that's it. That's essentially all
The way it was
that we believe in.
described to me was my rights ends where yours begin.
Yeah.
Essentially. So I can do essentially what I want as long as I'm not infringing upon another person's rights.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's cognitive thought. It's allowing, it's not manipulating people. You know, what I got disillusioned with politics a long time ago. I think in another life I'm probably a conservative MP candidate right now and something disgusting like that. But I got very disillusioned with it because you see the divisiveness that happens with the parties, and then you see the manipulation, and it's just turned in the decision point that people are making is very, very small. And they're electing someone, and then these people like Justin Trudeau and John Horgan think they have a mandate to do whatever they want because people voted for them, and that's not how it's supposed to work. There's a book called Liberty in Peril that I really like, and they kind of go through the history of the United States and how the Constitution actually took away freedom and democracy takes away freedom. It's very interesting. Yeah, there was articles of Confederation before that took basically gave the federal government almost no power, which sounds amazing. But they were going to have another constitution that was kind of based on the Iroquois model, which is the chief is the best listener. It's not the one with the biggest ego and the one that wants the most power. It's the person that's able to listen the best, and then they go and they talk to the other chiefs, and they talk, and if they can't come to a consensus, then they go back and they discuss some more. And it's a very slow form of government, and you have to submit that the government does very little with that type of government. But I think that's how it should be. Like, we're electing someone like John Horgan to make decisions for 5 million people in a very disparate province. Like, they make decisions that they think make sense in the Lower Mainland that are harming farmers in the Peace region.
Right.
And they don't care because they're all worried about mega mansions.
Right.
Meanwhile, a farmer in the Peace region can't build a house and have their cousins live in it on their property, right? So I think it's very misunderstood a lot. Like, a lot of people, and it's funny because they'll be like, what's the end state of libertarianism? Like, isn't it just chaos? And I'm like, okay, what's the end state of socialism? What's the end state of conservatism? We're not getting to the end state of libertarianism. Right. Let's look at how we can adjust the society that we're in a little bit at a time. Like, if we had 87 MLAs elected, we're not going to cancel the government on the first day. That would violate the non-aggression principle. Like, we're going to harm people by doing that. But what we will do is start to diminish the role of the government, start to give responsibility back to the people. And one good example is there's a big fight about the homeless situation in Penticton, and the provincial government has harmed the situation severely. They took away an addiction center. They trying to force a homeless shelter where the city doesn't want it. And everyone are like, well, you know, if you don't want centralized government, you're deferring the homeless problem. Like, I put it back to you. You're deferring your community responsibility. You think the government's taking care of it so that you don't have to. It used to be that people cared about their community and they took care of their community. And if we had all our money and we got to decide where our money went, I submit that we would do a much better job than a centralized government. Another quick example is the fire situation has just been abhorrent this year, and I know people on the inside where there's procurement issues. There's equipment sitting on the ground. There was a structure suppression unit near Monty Lake, 20 minutes away, waiting to be called, but because they weren't called, they weren't allowed to go. All kinds of things like this, and again, it's either deliberate or incompetent, and I think it's a little bit of both. Right. It plays well for the climate change agenda, I think, for the Horgan government. But again, and healthcare I could go on about, but it comes back down to this personal responsibility. And why are we deferring our responsibility for our community back to a centralized government? Like, it's proven to be a failure. Yeah. But we just keep doing it. And let's elect the Liberals. No, that's still bad. Let's elect the NDP again. It's still bad. And let's just go back and forth. What if we tried something like the Libertarian Party and we said, hey, we're not going to take all your money?
Yeah, I can't find many people who like politicians. Like, it doesn't seem like it on both sides, right?
I don't even like myself. I'm kidding. I don't like to be called a politician. I mean, I can play that game. But again, like you have to check yourself, right? Because people aren't necessarily hard to manipulate. And if you have that ability it's very important to not use it, and it's dangerous. And if I see people, they're like, oh yeah, great. You're the leader of the Libertarian Party. I believe everything you say. Stop. I quit.
Right.
You shouldn't believe everything I say just because you think I'm the leader. That's what's got us into this mess. We should always be questioning, always be thinking, and nobody should ever 100% agree with me. I'm not always right. I'm often wrong. And how could I be right? It's a diverse population.
Where does the role of like a military come into play with a libertarian kind of perspective? Because obviously you do need the federal kind of government to have a military that protects our borders and can go and protect people overseas if necessary as well. Do you agree that?
Yeah, I'd say from a party perspective, we would agree that defending our borders is a function of government, as long as we have some say in it. Provincially, it's kind of less of an issue because we don't have our own. I think we should. I think we should have choice in policing too. Having one single option for security in your life is not very healthy.
Yeah, and having multiple options creates competition, and competition generally creates advancements, and because they have to be the better one in order to gain your service or gain your dollars or whatever it may be. Many people point to the United States for not having public health care. Would public health care come under the umbrella of a libertarian perspective, or not necessarily?
I'm against public health care personally. I think it's very poorly done. I could actually get myself around the fact that there could be public services. ICBC is something that we're very much against. We'll turn it into a co-op.
Sure, you got a lot of people agree with you there.
Public health care, if it was your choice, right? Taxation isn't your choice. It's like the mafia protecting you.
Right.
Right? They're forcing your money into their hands and then deciding what to do with it. If taxation was voluntary and people said, I want this public health care and please take my tax dollars to do it, but I had that choice to do something different. There's a lot of models going around the world that are much, much better than ours. There's the U.S. isn't the best model for sure. There's a lot of bureaucracy going on in there and a lot of corruption. But I know there is one primary care network type place, and all the patients pay a monthly fee and they get access to doctors, dentists, optometrists, physio, all of these things. And they have a holistic look at the patient, right? Like our system, my optometrist once referred something to my doctor and she's like, oh, that's great. That almost never happens. Well, why does that never happen? And so if you have all these medical professionals all caring about the same patient and they collaborate and they understand each other, it's going to be a much more efficient system. And it's not a very big monthly fee either. It's a hell of a lot less than I'm paying in taxes for government monopoly of healthcare that they took away last year.
And so how do you get health care to some of the more disenfranchised people in our society if it's not public?
There's lots of ways to do that. Like I don't agree that humanity will leave people behind just because the government's not taking care of them. Lots of countries will do, you pay a user fee to go to a doctor's appointment, but if you truly can't pay, then you don't have to. And we have that with pharmaceuticals in BC as well. If you truly can't pay, then we'll take care of it. The fact is there's no choice to it, though, and that's what causes problems. I know of a doctor from South Africa, and they have user fees there. I think it's $15 a visit, and he would see 40 patients a day, but every one of those 40 patients needed to see him. In Canada, he's seeing about 100 to 120 patients a day, and 80% of them don't need to be there.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like a very efficient system at that point.
No, and there's no incentive for efficiency, and there's no autonomy over the healthcare workers either. Like I talked to a couple nurses after the election, and they're like, "Oh, we always vote NDP. Why? Well, they take care of us."
Yeah, exactly.
Do they? And I listed off a few examples, and then I explained this community care nursing model in the Netherlands. And they got rid of all the bureaucrats and the schedulers and the admin staff, and the community nurses only worked within their own community, and they knew which patients to see. If someone needed to pick their kid up from school, someone had their back. If they want to take vacation, they decided amongst themselves. The costs were 60% less, patient outcomes through the roof, and the nurses are actually happy in their lives. And they're like, and I'm like, so how often in your day do you think that you should be doing something for patient care, but you're not allowed to?
Right.
And they're like, yeah, you're right. Like, all these admin people don't know what they're doing, and they're telling us what to do. The woman that heads up the NDP campaigns in the Okanagan, she's a nurse, and she works at a primary care network. She lives in Peachland, and she wanted to work at the one in West Kelowna. Well, they wouldn't let her, so she drives to Vernon every day. How does that make sense?
No, it doesn't. Yeah.
And she still supports that government.
I guess the issues that I've heard with libertarianism is that there would be kind of a classist system created. You'd have very, very, very rich people and then very, very, very poor people. But I guess you would argue that humanity wouldn't leave those people behind, and some forms of charity could be involved to help them, or the advancements in kind of tech and whatnot would trickle down and help those people.
Yeah, and I think we have a class system anyway. So
right.
and I think where people kind of misunderstand is it really isn't. We're not looking for every man for themselves. We're looking for a true and real free market society. A lot of the inequities that are happening in the capitalist society that we live in now is because of crony capitalism, and because they have so much influence on the government. Walmart gets different rules than the small business operator, and that's because they have clout and they have influence.
I've when I was when the Occupy Wall Street movement was happening down in the United States, I watched a interesting video with a man, Peter Schiff, and he was holding a sign out there saying, "I'm the 1%, let's talk." And so all these hostile people who are against the 1% are attacking him and screaming at him and stuff like that. But some of the points that he made was like, why are you protesting on Wall Street? You should be in Washington protesting your politicians and the system you have here, because they're creating the rules to the game for these corporations to take advantage of, and to make you, the regular man or woman or whatever, you're not getting access to the same set of rules as what the corporations are getting access to. And so the government, that's where cronyism comes in. That's where it's like they're playing by a different set of rules, and that's causing them to be hyper successful. That's causing them to have privileges that a small business might not have. And so it doesn't make sense to attack the middle of the snake. You have to attack the head of the snake and go to the government and say, why are you creating these extra rules for these people? Oh, it's because they're paying you, they're lobbying, they're giving you fancy jobs once you leave office, and that's why.
Yeah, and that kind of stuff happens here too. With the fancy jobs, I know the West Kelowna MLA, when Christy Clark needed him to step down, he got a big job with the Fruit Growers Association for $300,000+ a year. Didn't do anything,
right?
And then got his job back. From what I heard secondhand, I'm not trying to slander somebody, but I feel like this is probably true from who I heard it from. It's I read an article yesterday that BlackRock and one of the other big investment firms, they figure they're going to own 10 years, they're going to own 20% of all businesses in the world, like a capitalization of $20 trillion, right? It comes down to government interference almost all of the time. I met a great bartender at the Wings restaurant in West Kelowna, and I always mention libertarian, and most time people don't know what it is, and try to open up a conversation. And he knew what it was. He's like, wow, this is cool. And he went to a convention in Washington several years ago, and I'm like, wow, what's your path, your journey? How did you get there? And he said, well, I was taking economics in school, and we started doing the modeling and everything, and every time government interfered, it messed up the economic models. Everything. And that's whether they're controlling interest rates or Justin Trudeau's plan to everybody gets a house kind of thing. Government interferes, it makes things worse. It just always happens. So he found libertarianism, and he went down to Washington, and he said Ron Paul was there, and he got to hear him speak, and then they zoomed in, or not Zoom at the time, Skyped in Edward Snowden to talk.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, ooh, I got chills.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah. Yeah, that's the thing that people don't realize is some of these things, like everybody get a house, it sounds great on paper, but in practice, is it actually a realistic thing, and is it going to be better in the long run? And Edward Snowden is obviously famous for exposing some of the securities and or the loss of securities and privacy and privileges that people had in the United States through the Patriot Act. And it was, the 9/11 happened, 2001, they introduced the Patriot Act to stop terrorism and have counterterrorism access, but then obviously the U.S. government and the NSA went on to use that Patriot Act to spy illegally on American citizens. And so sometimes just because these things sound good on paper don't mean that they're actually good for us as a society.
Yeah, and that's why as a libertarian government, we would restrict government from being allowed to do that. So we would enshrine property rights into a constitution so that the government can't take these things away, and that includes your body. And I lost my train of thought there. I had a good one, but
talking about the Patriots Act. And
so you give government the ability to take away your freedom, and it sounds very good, right? Like one example is when they gave the police the ability to go enter your home if someone accused you of drinking and driving up to 2 hours after you've been drinking and driving.
Is that here in Canada?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know if it's still in, I remember this was years ago. It's probably still in effect, but you give police the ability to enter someone's home for something as innocuous as that. And I agree, you shouldn't be drinking and driving, but 2 hours later, like, you could be home having a bottle.
Right. Yeah.
But now you give them the opportunity to enter your home. No knock raids and things are happening in Canada quite severely as well. And so when you and it's the same with the charter too. You give these outs for the government, they will take them. So you have to take away the ability for them to be corrupt, because everybody is corrupt. I'd like to say I'm incorruptible, and I think I'm as close as a person can get. But I don't want the power of Bill 19 that BC has that allows you to take away freedoms in a state of emergency. I don't want that. I shouldn't have that. I shouldn't be allowed to have that, and we have to stop any of these abilities. Like, I don't know if you heard on the radio show where the guy's like, well, the police are allowed to just pull you over and ask for your ID. Do you think that's a violation of your rights? Absolutely. Where's the crime?
Right.
No victim, no crime. And that gives them the ability to harass people. And maybe they don't. Maybe we have a perfect police force. We don't. It's very corrupt.
Yes. I think that's very clear. We do not have a perfect police force. And that's the problem, is if you give them these overarching powers, then they will abuse them. Somebody, if you can accuse somebody of drinking and driving and the police can go and break into their home 2 hours later, they could just use that as an excuse to have for an alternative motive. And that's not okay. They shouldn't have that power and that ability. Do you agree with some regulations and stuff like that, though? Because, like, there's obviously housing regulations. Climate change is obviously a major talking point right now. I'm sure you have your opinions on that, but surely some regulations are good.
Yeah, we don't want free-for-all, but I think oftentimes industry can make those regulations. So I'm a professional engineer, and we're a self-regulated industry, and so we have our own board, we have our own governance, and so you opt in to be that. The problem is you can't opt into the government. I was talking to another local business owner who got into regulatory hell with his business. I won't name names, and he's like, absolutely, we should be regulated. Like, if we're not, we're going to do bad things. But the industry should be deciding that. And the government tends to give these arbitrary rules and regulations. And, I have a story from a guy, and he's actually running for the leader of the BC Liberal Party, and he's opening a daycare, and the person coming in to inspect the daycare is knocking on the window, and she's like, is that double pane glass? He's like, I just built this house here. I built it to code. Like 90% of your stuff can just be checked off, but there's no efficiency. There's no desire to help that business owner. So if it's a self-regulated industry in the restaurant and distillery and brewery industry, have consequences, but there would be motivation to help that business owner open, whereas the government worker, their day is the same.
Right.
And that worker goes on vacation, and all these files to sit there for 2 weeks. Meanwhile, the business owner is losing thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of dollars in revenue because they're not open in May when they want to be open and can make money, especially in the Okanagan. I remember a winery or a wine restaurant in Penticton, they had been approved by the city for a patio, and the liquor inspector didn't approve it till September. Well, they just lost a whole lot of money.
Jeez.
Because they don't care. Right?
Yeah, it doesn't affect their day at the end of the day, right? That's wild. Well, Keith, is there anything that you'd like to kind of say to kind of put a nice bow tie on this podcast? And what are some steps? We obviously talked about the vaccine certificate in the first segment, but what are some steps that you're taking now? And yeah, I'll leave the floor to you.
Yeah, there is a lot of movement and a lot of things happening. It's overwhelming, but it's good to know that there are people that are willing to stand up for our freedoms. I think what we need to do is get more professionals and business owners, and I'm trying to find the right word for this because I'm not trying to throw like the freedom rallies under the bus, because there's a lot of great people that go there, but the problem is the media paints it very, very poorly. And so how can we activate the masses of people that are against this but don't feel like they have a voice and they are afraid? Because I know, whether it's optometrists, doctors, lawyers, business owners, employees, like there are a lot of people that are upset about what is going on and they're afraid to speak up. And so how do we get them to have a voice, and how do we change the conversation in the media, because the government's funding the media. I know this, and I know if they go stray too far, they will lose their funding. And
well, did you see what happened? I don't know if the government's funding Castanet by any means, but did you see what happened with the Castanet poll over the vaccine certificate 2 days ago?
Yeah, I saw there were some bots or something.
Yeah, there was. They posted like, "Are you for this?" And I think by 12 o'clock at night, it was roughly 70% were not for it, and roughly 30% were for it, and then there was a small percentage that was kind of indifferent, and obviously those numbers don't add up, but that's just the rough numbers. And overnight, 40,000 votes came in order to sway the vote to make it seem like people were for this vaccine certificate. And I think the most a Castanet poll had ever gotten was 40,000 votes, and so these 40,000 votes came in overnight, and Castanet recognized it, and they made an editor's note, and they said there was a problem. There was a bunch of bots that hacked this to change the narrative. So there is a full-forced effort to control the narrative surrounding this vaccine certificate, and that makes me very scared.
Yeah, no, it's scary, and I don't know. Maybe it's not nefarious. Maybe I think it probably is, and I think this is the first step of further taking away our freedoms. Even if it's not, it's still wrong, and we have to stand up for it now. And again, peaceful. Every time someone yells at somebody and it gets put on the media, it makes everybody look ridiculous. And I know from my conversations with people who reach out to me from me being brave enough to have a voice, there's way more out there than you think, and they're scared and they don't know what to do. And they're afraid of losing their jobs and their businesses because they're uncomfortable with this treatment, which it's a new treatment.
Yeah.
It's their right to be uncomfortable with it.
100%.
And this narrative that if you don't, you are harming the planet is it's scary. It's scary to see people manipulate. It's scary to see logical people yelling at family members to just do it so this can be over. What happens if it's not over? Because it's not going to be over.
Yeah, it's just unfortunate that we've come to the point where people can't have just a logical and level-headed discourse surrounding something like this that is an unprecedented act by the BC government.
Yeah.
You have the right to be confused and ask questions. And the fact that that's being shut down is I disagree with. So the government could be absolutely right in what they're doing right now. This could be the right move forward. It may not be nefarious, but if you're confused and you're asking questions, you have a right to do that, and you should.
Yeah, and it goes both ways. Like I was speaking at one of the freedom rallies, and one of our candidates was wearing a mask, and there was reasons why he was doing it, and it was his choice, and he doesn't want to, but he was wearing it. And some people came up to him and they were yelling at him and like, don't you know this? And then they're spouting off. He's like, yeah, I know all that, but I've chosen to wear this.
Mm-hmm.
And he and then me again reinforced it. I said, do you understand? You telling him to take that mask off is the same as the government telling you to put it on.
Exactly.
And he's like, oh yeah, you're right. So like it has to go both ways. I'm very passionately against the vaccine passports, passionately against coercion by the government. And I know that what's been done with this pandemic is extremely wrong. And I'm passionate about that, but I have to remember to stay on that side of reasonableness, that I'm not going to shun my family members because they choose something different than me.
Peace and love.
Yeah.
Peace and love at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Well, Keith, where can people find you, reach out to you, support you?
So libertarian.bc.ca. Please join the party. I hate asking for donations because I think politics is gross, but every dollar counts. Yeah. And the government, you can actually look at it as you're taking money back from the government. So a $100 donation, they give you $75 back. So it really only costs you $25. They also give per vote subsidies to the big parties and subsidize half their campaign expenses.
But jeez, I didn't know that.
Millions and millions of dollars. They think they're so important. Libertarian.bc.ca. I'm most active on Facebook, so you can find me, Keith MacIntyre, Libertarian leader. Starting to get a little more active on Twitter as well.
Okay. Well, we'll put those links down in the description.
Awesome.
Sweet. Thanks, Keith.
Thank you.